landscape. Let us not make ourselves smaller than we are.
To summarize my core messages as
task.
briefly as I can, to our European colleagues, let's toughen up. To our American allies, we have different worldviews, but many good reasons to work together. And to our international guests, the world is changing, but Europe remains Europe. We are open for business. We are open for partnership. Thanks to all of you for listening. I wish you a productive Munich Security Conference. Thank you.
Lieber Bundespräsident, thank you very much for your very optimistic speech. Always look for a silver lining with all the gloom and doom, and you gave this silver lining personally and with your speech. Thank you for this. It is now my pleasure and honor to introduce the Prime Minister of Bavaria, Markus Söder. Markus Söder and his team have been a wonderful supporter and generous host for the Munich Security Conference now for 6 months.
ending the war will also be at the heart of discussions and the many engagements here in the corridors in Munich.
Dass dieser Krieg zu Ende geht, das wünschen sich alle.
That outcome, an end to this war, is what we all hope for. How this war concludes will have a lasting impact on our security order and also on the influence of both Europe and the United States in the world. Well, please, feel free. Don't be shy. I firmly believe that simply making a deal and leaving would weaken us all, Ukraine and Europe, but also the United States. And for this very reason, every scenario, be it before or after the end of fighting, requires our combined power of deterrence and strength. And that is why in every scenario, support for Ukraine must continue, namely from Europe and the United States. The third point is particularly important to me. Despite all the upheavals, I still believe in the international community. Diplomacy is not a cage fight. Dazed, with our eyes fixed on the White House, each morning's news since 20th of January has left everyone wondering, what is next and who is next? Not only does all of this feed the online outrage apparatus, it also has real consequences. I happened to be in Jordan last week on the very morning President Trump announced a plan to relocate Palestinians from Gaza into the neighboring countries. And on the streets of Amman, I could feel people's naked fear for their very existence and the very existence of their country. And I do not intend to comment and evaluate in detail every single announcement and every plan made public in recent days. Rather, I direct an appeal to us, the representatives of the international community of states represented here in this hall, and I ask us, how will it change the character of international politics? Might the next 4 years not only transform the relationship between the United States and other countries, but also the relationships among states themselves? Will the international community as a whole sustain damage? My answer, a simple one, but I believe it to be the right one. It is up to us. We are subjects, not objects in the international order. We must not allow ourselves to be paralyzed by the flood of announcements.
I've been coming here for many, many years, and I see many familiar faces. I've been coming here from the times when it was an exclusively transatlantic audience, to today when we see political, business, and thought leaders from right across the world. This is a testament not only to the great success of the Munich Security Conference, but it also reflects on how the rest of the world impacts our security and our transatlantic relationship. Our task here in Munich is not just to describe this year's geopolitical landscape, but to shape it. And shape it in a way that ensures that our transatlantic values endure and our interests are defended. Because there is a clear attempt by some to build spheres of influence. Competing visions of the world order are leading to a more transactional approach in global affairs. And Europe has to change to thrive in this new reality. We have to be smart. We have to be clear-eyed about what is ahead of us. From a rogue Russia on our borders to challenges to our sovereignty and our security. And we should not underestimate the disruptive potential of intense competition or even a bipolar conflict between China and the United States. This may be uncomfortable to hear, but this is a time for plain speaking. The good news is that as we approach this new year of change, Europe is already reforming. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the full-scale energy crisis have been brutal times for all of us. But in Europe, they showed us also that when we adopt an urgency mentality, we are a force that can move mountains. From the life-saving vaccines to the unwavering support to Ukraine or mastering the energy crisis. Europe has shown that it can meet the moment, and we must adopt this urgency mentality more permanently. And this is why what you've seen in the first 100 days of the new Commission is the tone and the speed I intend to set for the whole mandate. We're strengthening our competitiveness, we're stepping up on defense, we're enabling innovation for AI. Action is what really matters in this new reality. And we know a stronger Europe is better for all of us. A stronger Europe works with the United States to deter the threats we have in common as partners. And this is why we believe that trade wars and punitive tariffs make no sense. Tariffs act like a tax. They drive inflation. The hardest hit are inevitably workers, companies, the small income, the middle classes on both sides of the Atlantic. And we know how quickly tariffs can affect essential transatlantic supply chains. We do not believe that this is good business, and we want to avoid a global race to the bottom. But as I've already made clear, unjustified tariffs on the European Union will not go unanswered. And let me speak plainly. We are one of the world's largest markets. We will use our tools to safeguard our economic security and interests, and we will protect our workers, our businesses, and consumers at every turn. Of course, we're ready to find agreements that work for all, to work together to make each other more prosperous and more secure. Ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of this is, of course, defense and the security of Ukraine, of our continent, and of the wider world. In this room, we all feel it, what's at stake. This is a moment in history. Great challenges loom. There has been a lot of talk in the last few days, but it is always instructive to look beyond the words and to recognize that we are just at the beginning of this process. Let's take stock of the starting positions. Contrast the approach taken by President Zelensky and that of President Putin. In the most difficult of circumstances, President Zelensky is prepared to work towards a peace that honors the sacrifice of his country and his fallen compatriots. As Volodymyr Zelensky said from the start, Ukraine wants peace more than anyone else, one that is just and lasting, so that the horrors of the last 3 years are not revisited ever again. On the other hand, President Putin says he's willing to meet, but on what terms? It is up to him to demonstrate that his interest is not to prolong this war. It is up to him to show that he has given up his ambition to destroy Ukraine. And let me be very clear. A failed Ukraine would weaken Europe, but it would also weaken the United States. It would intensify the challenges in the Indo-Pacific and threaten our shared interests. Because what we have seen is the authoritarians of this world are carefully watching whether there's any impunity if you invade your neighbor and violate international borders, or whether there are real deterrents. They are watching us very carefully, what actions we choose to take, and this is why it is so important that we get this right. Ukraine needs peace through strength. Europe wants peace through strength. And President Trump has made clear the United States is firmly committed to peace through strength. So I believe that by working together, we can deliver that just and lasting peace. And there's a lot that Europe already has brought to the table. Historic amounts, actually. Financially and militarily, the overall support amounts to 134 billion euros. That is an equivalent of $140 billion. That is more than anybody else has contributed. This includes $52 billion of military assistance, on par with the United States. We have put in place hard-hitting sanctions, substantially weakening Russia's economy. We have broken one taboo after another and smashed our reliance on Russian gas, making us more resilient permanently. And we are about to do more. We are working with Ukraine on their EU accession, because Ukraine is part of our European family, and this is where their future lies, here in Europe. And ladies and gentlemen, this leads me to the discussions we have had in Europe over the course of the last few weeks. Many in the security circles in Europe were confused, some even worried, by the comments made by a senior US official earlier this week. But we need to be honest here. And we need to avoid outrage and outcry. Because if we listen to the substance of the remarks, we not only understand where they are coming from, but recognize there are some remarks we can agree on. Because yes, both the United States and the European Union want an end to the bloodshed. We want a just and lasting peace, one that leads to a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. And Ukraine should be given solid security guarantees. But perhaps what resonates with me the most is the need for Europe not only to speak frankly, but also to act accordingly, So let there be no room for any doubt. I believe when it comes to European security, Europe has to do more. Europe must bring more to the table. And to achieve this, we need a surge in European defense spending. Currently, the EU 27 are spending around 2% of GDP on defense. And yes, our defense spending went up from just over 200 billion before the war to now over 320 billion last year. But we will need to increase that number considerably once again, because from just below 2% to above 3% will mean hundreds of billions of euro of more investment every year. So we need a bold approach. Let's take one step back. In previous extraordinary crises, look at what we did. We empowered member states with extra fiscal room by activating the escape clause. In simple terms, we empowered member states to substantially increase public investments linked to the crisis. I believe we are now in another period of crisis which warrants a similar approach. And this is why I can announce that I will propose to activate the escape clause for defense investments. This will allow member states to substantially increase their defense expenditure. Of course, we will have to do this in a controlled and conditional way. And I will also propose a wider package of tailor-made tools to address the specific situation of each and every one of our member states, from their current levels of defense spending to their fiscal situation. Second, for a massive defense package, we also need a European approach in setting our investment priorities. This will allow the investments in much-needed defense projects of common European interest. And thirdly, we will step up our work to accelerate the accession process of Ukraine to the European Union. We have made significant progress already, but again, now is the time to move mountains in the European Union. Increase the spending possibility of the national budgets, have common European funding for projects of common European interest, and accelerate the accession process of Ukraine. This must be the goal of the new Europe that is working for these goals intensively. My message is, you see Europe adapting, you see Europe stepping up, you see Europe making a difference immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, what is being discussed here today is ultimately about us, our prosperity, our economy, our security, our ability to make good on Europe's enduring promise of peace. Our values do not change. They are universal. But because the world is changing, we have to adapt the way we act. We need a Europe that is more pragmatic, more focused, more determined, one that will counter its threats, one that will leverage its enormous strength and power, and one that is standing by Ukraine and its partners. And there's a lot that this Europe can do, and it will rise to the moment. Thank you very much, and long live Europe.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Yalda Hakim, and I'll be moderating a brief 5-minute session here with the President. We are running a little bit behind schedule, and we have the Vice President also waiting. But I'm really looking forward to speaking with you. You made a very consequential speech there. For several years in Munich, leaders have said it's time to get serious about European defence. Will it be different this time?
Absolutely, because it is in our own interest, and we have the experience of now almost 3 years of an atrocious Russian war in Ukraine, basically at our borders. And this is only one of the challenges we see. So it's absolutely clear, and it is this mentality of urgency that I was asking for, that we have to develop and therefore step up defense. We have for too long, I mean the last 2 decades, kind of outsourced defense and security or underinvested in it. And now we see that there's an enormous gap that we have to close. And therefore, us together as Europeans, we have to step up and we have to make these investments, because it's for our security that we are doing this and where that it is necessary.
What do you think that should be? I mean, do you agree with President Trump that it should be 5%?
Look, for us it's important that we close our capability gaps, and there's a process in NATO that has defined what the capability gaps are. So spending must increase without any question, but important is that we get the right capabilities for the investment that we are doing, and therefore filling these investment gaps, this must be our goal, as rapid as possible, with the norms and standards of NATO, because for me it's very important that we are absolutely complementary with NATO. We need each other. And therefore, I propose to flexibilize the possibility of the member states what their investment in defense is concerned, even if they have fiscal constraints. With this escape clause, this opens the door for targetedly investing more in defense. So this is individual for each member state. Then we have to look at big projects of common European interest, like advanced air defense, for example, which no member state can do on its own, but we need it all together. Then there's a point I have not mentioned here, but this is speaking with our banks, the promotional banks, like the European Investment Bank, that used to not invest in defense, now is changing their lending practices. And of course, we have also to speak with our big private banks that were hiding behind the EIB for too long, also to modernize and adapt their lending practices.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but Ukraine clearly wants and needs security guarantees in any peace negotiation. Is Europe capable of providing them without the US, even if that is not the preference?
So I think for European, as it is not for me to discuss in detail the security guarantees with the United States, because this is a NATO matter. But I think we have to convince all of us that this is a matter of providing security guarantees by countries from the European Union.
Including troops on the ground?
But listen, this really is the competence of the member states. This is certainly not me making them or proposing them how they have to act with their troops. They have the complete competence of their troops. But I think in general, if you look at any kind of security matters concerning Europe and NATO, we all need each other. In other words, the backing of the United States is needed as the European Union, but also the UK or Canada, for example, to take others. Norway are also needed in the concert of supporting each other.
Will Europe be at the negotiating table?
Absolutely, because Ukraine needs a just and lasting peace. If we want to achieve this goal, and it's very important that we have a true peace, because as I said, others are watching, whether we stick to our principles or whether we give up. Then this is only possible with the European Union standing by Ukraine, because one of the components you just mentioned is security guarantees. Another component is the accession process of Ukraine to the European Union, preconditions to have a just and lasting peace. And therefore, the answer is given by itself.
President von der Leyen, thank you so much for your time.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. It is now my honor and pleasure to welcome the Vice President of the United States, Mr. J.D. Vance, who was here last year as Senator, and we are very happy that he has come back to Munich, and we are very much looking forward to his speech. Please welcome Vice President J.D. Vance.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all the gathered delegates and luminaries and media professionals, and thanks especially to the host of the Munich Security Conference for being able to put on such an incredible event. We're, of course, thrilled to be here. We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of us who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first time I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now, I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security, and normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European